MLA. Some of you may not need this review, others of you will. I can do it pretty quickly. As always, if you have questions, I can answer a few of them here. I don't want to spend a lot of time on this, but I can answer any kind of questions you may have about MLA. Also, before I forget, I want to point out to you, I actually have an MLA template on Courstin. It's in the syllabus and other helpful documents section. It is one of those helpful documents. You can pretty much copy and paste into it. It is a template. Some people get cocky with that stuff, though. You still want to take your time to make sure you get it right. But anyway. All right, MLA, how it works. Does anybody know? Off the top of your head? What are some of the things we got to make sure we do to set this guy up in MLA? Good. So it's a little bit different in every word processor. In this one, I believe, yeah, line spacing, double. I'm going to help you real quick too. You also, by default, all right. So that's nice. By default, I guess in Google, they don't have spaces after paragraphs. But basically in every other word processor they do. It'll give you an extra space after a paragraph. You will turn that off. Anyway, all right, so we got our spacing set. What else we got to do?
12 times New Roman.
Good. 12 times New Roman. Good. What's next?
Page number. Last name.
All right, so the way to do that, this is again pretty much the same across the board. You're going to have to go to Insert, okay? You want a header. What this is, you can right align it or you can tab over. That's really up to you. My name. You also need to insert page number separately because nothing is easy in life. And finally, you have to make this Times New Roman 12 on its own. I don't know why. All right. Good day. What's next?
First, last name.
What happened?
First name, last name.
Yeah. That's me. What's next? And I'll just pick one I had way back when. He's in West Virginia now. He's a cool guy.
Class.
Yeah. Ours. I believe it's 91. One last thing. The date. Now the smart thing to do, this is a very minute detail, however, it's one of those things I feel like can probably help you once in your life, like one time it will help you. Just go ahead and date that sucker the day this thing is due, whenever that is, right? And I'm using my memory right now, which is very fallible when dates are concerned, but I'm going to say, oh wait, that's definitely wrong. We'll say the 13th June 2021, right? I'm ballparking. That's not the due date, I'm pretty sure.
16.
Damn, I was close. Anyway. All right, what's next?
Title.
Title. Now, if we are crushing it, we will find some time to talk about the title sometime before the paper is due. But anyway, you want it to be better than this. My personal favorite, I often get this, which is fun. That just means that you haven't been paying attention. All right. Anyway, we're pretty much set to go. You notice I went one down and I tabbed over because you want to indent your paragraphs. Now you just start the thing. You're good after this. You only need this header on the very first page. That header will show up on every page because of how we put it in. And there's works cited, but that's another conversation. Questions about that? Okay, and like I said, I know I moved through that quickly, but if I go any slower, you guys will fall asleep. Also, it's MLA. It's kind of everywhere. I have a template on Courstin. You can Google stuff. Legit, there are very boring YouTube videos on how do I put in a header, how do I, you can find it, okay? But you can also always ask me. We can cross those bridges. In terms of questions, these are the easiest questions I get. So, all right. Moving on. Talk about other things. Oh, I have an email. Hey. Thanks, guys. By the way, do you guys see that? You see how I have no unread email? Isn't that wild? Anyway.
21 drafts.
Yeah, that's stuff I used to save, and then I don't even bother. That's all trash. I should throw it out. Anyway, close that. The prompt, which I could probably make a little familiar. All right. I like to put the particulars right up front. So, source text. Any assigned Fairchild poem for this first paper. You may notice, Fairchild poem. We are not writing about Martin's Ferry. That's not written by B.H. Fairchild. It's another guy. We're not doing that. That's just for a class example for the first day, okay? But, old man playing basketball, little boy, body and soul, beauty, any of those. One. You only pick one, okay? I promise you, if you attempt to do more than one, you will probably only really write me like a compare-contrast essay or a book report. Like, this is how these poems are similar. It's like, they were written by the same guy. Like, it's not, right? We're not doing that. You pick one. Okay. Length. At least 3 pages, not counting the works cited. Some people panic at this stage. 3 pages really isn't a lot. It's like around 1,000 words. If that feels like a lot right now, I mean, I do sympathize with you, but at the same time, you can do it. It's really not that bad. Plus, it's double spaced. Think about it this way. You're only actually writing me 1.5 pages. That's nothing. We could all do that. Percentage of your grade. 25% of your final grade. You do have permission to freak out a little bit about that number. That is a big number. I get that. That's just the nature of these classes. But everything we do up until we turn this in is going to be geared toward this paper. I'm going to do my best to prepare you to do as well as you can for that 25% of your final grade. That's the only solace I can offer you. Anyway. Format. We just went over it. It's MLA, typed, double-spaced, all that stuff. And a works cited page. And it's due the 16th. What the assignment is, really, we started this conversation last time. What I will not do to you in this class is read stuff like this at you, okay? This is here for you. It's on CourseDen. If you want to look over it, I think you should. I think it will help you better understand what it is I'm asking for this assignment, okay? But I like to just sum it up for you. What this paper is, I want you to pick a poem. I want you to investigate that poem in the way we started last time. What that means is, number one, as I already alluded to, we are not writing a book report. You don't really owe me plot. I read the poem too. You got to give me a little bit occasionally so I know where you're at. That makes sense. That's how we talk to people. But other than that, what does this poem say about us as a people, a society, a culture? Okay? And that's a very big question, but that's why you take a couple pages to figure it out, right? So for instance, last time, old man playing basketball. You would not write me a paper to the effect of, this is a poem all about basketball. It's like, well, no shit. No, what you do instead is, again, like we started last time, we're going to continue today. Is there anything else going on in the poem? Anything that you might miss on a first read? What about that weird question that the speaker asks about halfway through? Now, with that question in mind, I guess if you guys don't know what I'm talking about, he wonders if they're still having sex with their wives, right? It's kind of weird. When you have that in your mind, you go back and you read the poem, there's all this suggestive language kind of everywhere. Almost like this guy, even when he's not thinking about it, consciously, is thinking about the sex lives of these old men. And we, I don't remember who said it last time, but we kind of supposed, well, that's probably because he is wondering about getting old, which means he's wondering about his own sex life, his own sexual ability. And by the end of class, we kind of got to the idea of, well, why is he so wrapped up in that? And like, sort of that plus the dude with the house shoes, right? He's worried about his waning masculinity. He's worried about what will become of his sort of man card decades down the line. He's worried about it. That's where we ended class. That's all the time we have. But if we had continued, my line of questioning would have been something to the effect of, why is he so worried about that? You know what I mean? Why is he so worried about his man card, the loss of it, and how it's going to happen to him? then it kind of colors his every thought in the poem. You know what I'm saying? Why is he so driven by that? Anxiety. That's a hard question. But that's the kind of question I want you thinking about when it comes to this paper. Okay? It's probably the kind of question you can't just sit down and knock out immediately. That's good. It's going to take some pages. That's what we're after. Okay? And we're going to practice it some more in about 2 minutes. At this stage, are there any questions about what I just yammered at you about? I know I talk a lot. Okay. The only other thing I want to point out, and then we'll go to the poem. I used to not have this on here, but you guys surprised me still. There's no place for outside sources in this paper. The best advice I can give you there, unless a prompt specifically asks for outside sources, don't use outside sources. What is wrong with people? Don't do that. Okay. What did I say? We're going to talk poem, yes? Yes? Maybe? Oh, wait, my notes are great. Hang on. Yes. All right, let's talk about the poem. And because I had you sort out the Wi-Fi, at least most of you, some of you said you had problems. If you would like to follow along on your device, I would encourage you. But I'll have it up here too. I mean, you guys got young eyes, some of you, maybe you can see it. All right. Little boy. The sun lowers on our backyard in Kansas, and I am looking up through the circling spokes of a bicycle, asking my father as mindlessly as I would ask if he ever saw DiMaggio or Mantle, why we dropped the bomb on those 2 towns in Japan. And his face goes all wooden, the eyes freezing like rabbits in headlights, the palm of his hand slowly tapping the arm of the lawn chair that has appeared in family photographs since 1945. The shadow of my mother thrown across it, the green Packard in the background, which my father said he bought, because after Saipan and Tinian and Okinawa, I felt like they owed it to me. These were names I didn't know, islands distant as planets, anonymous. Where is Saipan? Where is Okinawa? Where is the Pacific? Could you see the cloud in the air like the smoke from Eugene Messenbaum's semi, that huge cloud when he rolled it out on the Highway 54 last winter? The hand is hammering the chair arm, beating it, and I know it's all wrong as I move backward on the garage floor and watch his eyes watching the sun in its evening burial in the spreading silver light and in darkness over the farms and vast flat fields, which I will grow so tired of, so weary of years later, that I will leave, watching then as I do now his eyes, as they take in the falling rag of the sun, a level stare, a gaze that asks nothing and gives nothing, the sun burning itself to ashes constantly, the orange maze blackening in drought and waste, and he can do nothing, and neither can I. Okay. So the first thing we're going to do, and we're going to do it quicker today, but we're going to start in the same place we started last time, which is plot. Just what is happening literally in the poem. Okay? So we start in a backyard in Kansas, right? Apparently there's a little boy. He's hanging out with Dad. What happens between these two characters?
The little boy asked a question about war.
Specifically what? About what kind of bombs?
Atomic.
The atomic bombs. He asks his father why we dropped them. Now, he says he asks them mindlessly, like a kid would. Kids ask all kinds of questions. Some of them are pretty heavy. This happens to be one of those, right? How's the dad respond?
It's almost like he remembers something.
He freezes up.
He struggles with it, for sure. He does freeze up. Something is obviously running through his head, right? How does he answer the question?
He doesn't.
He doesn't. He never answers the question. Good. Now after that, we kind of, as you do in poems, we kind of move around. We do hear from the dad at one point. He talks about a Packard. Says he felt like they owed it to him. You might look up what a Packard was.
Car.
It's a car. It's like a nicer car. You know, good for him, I guess. We go back to the boy, wondering, what the hell are these places? Where is the Pacific? This is a little boy in Kansas in, I'm gonna guess, the 60s, thereabouts. Where is the Pacific? You know, he doesn't know. Is it like, this is him trying to figure out? He talks about the cloud, by the way, just so we're all on the same page. What cloud is he referencing? Mushroom cloud. Was it as big as last winter when that guy drove his semi out? You know, that was crazy. Was it that big? Okay. And then at the end, I think it's right after that question. Yeah, all one sentence. We go into, what's your guys' reading in this last bit? Talk a lot about the sun, and we're comparing it to things. How did you guys read that last?
I kind of thought of it as like sort of making a comparison to what the father might have seen if there was a if he saw the bomb explode.
Okay, like the devastation of it?
Mm-hmm. And how...
In a way, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, in a way. Okay. Yeah, what's up?
I took it as like he has some form of PTSD.
Oh.
And that last sentence at the end there talks about how he can't escape from it.
Yeah, I mean, I always get that reading. We'll talk about that. Okay. And there's one more bit of narrative. It's like, it's not subtle, but it's kind of slid in here a little bit. The boy tells us one more thing about himself.
He wants to leave.
He does. He does leave. Years later, right? He's tired of the farm life and all that. He gets out of it. Which is kind of interesting, right? Like there's all this devastation. Like I almost describe this as like apocalyptic imagery. And then right in the middle, it's like, oh, and I'm getting out of there. And it's kind of, it's interesting. All right. So that's the plot. Little boy asks dad, pretty heavy question. Dad takes that question, is like, okay, you know, and then we kind of go into some musings and some like comparisons, some apocalypse, little years down the line. That's it. Okay. What I want to do now, go with the plot out of the way. To the best of your ability. I'm just going to give you a couple minutes. It's a short poll. Alarm bells, like we did last time. If you have a reason for picking something, like, oh, I think this is interesting because of this, absolutely I want to hear it. But even if you don't, even if you're like, this seems important, I don't know why, that's fine too. Right? Take a couple minutes, see what you can pick out. We're going to talk about it. What did you guys come up with?
The shadow of my mother thrown.
What about that?
It's like he's not allowed to speak of it.
Well, what he's talking about, context is helpful. His dad's tapping the arm of the lawn chair, but then he says, that has appeared in family photographs since 1945, the shadow of my mother thrown across it. He's talking about family photos, right? The shadow of his mother thrown across this chair, right? Like in a picture. Now, on the one hand, yeah, you can see she's like a shadowy presence. She's not much in the poem. That's the only time she's in the poem. We do have to pump the brakes just a little bit, and I love this. This is Samuel L. Jackson in Pulp Fiction. The absence of evidence is not the evidence of absence. What he means by that is, just because she's not in the poem, we cannot say it means she's not like in their lives. You know what I'm saying? All we know is she's not in this poem. And especially because, again, context is everything. Think about the context of the poem. It's a little boy asking his dad a question. That's what the poem is about, right? Like, it's, mom's there, but she's not in this poem. Is all I wanted to say before we continue. Now, if you could help me again, why did you pick that out? Because it is interesting to me as well.
Right. Well, and I thought it was as simple as that she may be passed or she's not there. With that idea in mind, that they can't speak of her, she's
Well,
the ever-presence that nobody talks about. I don't think-
you gotta do your best to even if you have an idea about the poem, it's a good rule of thumb to have at least one more something in the poem you could point to and say, here's like further proof. Do you know what I'm saying? To me, I mean, this is the only mention we get of her. I don't know that we could go so far as to say she's like out of their lives, you know, like dead or whatever. But what we could do, I think we could, if we took a half step back, we could say she's not a part of this conversation. You see what I'm saying? Now, literally, that's the case. Boy talking to dad, it's an AB conversation, you know, in 3rd grade, see your way out, that whole thing. But if we want to entertain the conversation we're having in this class in general, this is a little boy asking his dad about what? Generally.
The atomic bomb.
And a little more general than that. What's he talking to dad about?
War.
War. You could begin to make an interesting case for why the little boy and or father might think mom doesn't belong in this conversation. You see what I'm saying? Does that make sense? Like this isn't her world. This isn't her shadow's there. She's there physically, but when it comes to discussion, she's not part of that discussion. That's not her wheelhouse here in, 1950s, 1960s. Now all of a sudden, we have a little bit of an inkling into, again, what these characters, their worldviews, right? That's kind of cool. And it's much easier to prove, right? We cannot prove that she's dead, but we can prove she's almost like a ghostly presence and what that might mean metaphorically. You know what I'm saying? Does that make sense? The other point I want to make here, this is a poem about atomic bombs. We all know a little bit about those. Like when I said, what cloud is he talking about? You guys are like, we know certain things. It's kind of famous. When we're talking about pictures and shadows, does that do anything for anybody? Shadows?
That's what it leaves behind after it goes up.
Yeah.
It leaves, like,
You'll see
shadow.
people sometimes, like on walls and stuff, like burned it, their shadows are burned into it, right? I think he's recalling that too. This to be obliterated to such an extent that your fucking shadow is burned into the. Yeah. I think he's doing that too. That I don't know what to do with. I don't. It's crazy. But again, because context. If it was a shadow in a different poem, it'd be a different thing. But we were talking about atomic bombs. We were evoking all the imagery of atomic bombs. It's there, right? So somehow, again, you could maybe begin to argue mom or her presence or what she meant or anything is somehow destroyed in some way or something. You could do that. Good. What else do you guys find?
I find it weird that he first talks about baseball.
Baseball. Up top. There's a boy. He's looking up through the circling spokes of a bicycle because kids have nothing but time. Asking my father as mindlessly as I would ask if he ever saw DiMaggio or Mantle why we dropped the bombs on those two towns in Japan. So, for good reason, these two lines get all the play in this poem because that's the moment of crisis, right? That's where the drama in this poem comes from, is that question. But what is interesting to me is the setup for that question. Who are DiMaggio and Mantle? Does anybody know?
Baseball players.
Hall of Fame baseball players. DiMaggio and Mantle. Mantle is actually in the poem we're going to read after the break. Yeah. And he says, this boy says, he asks this question basically with the same tone as he would ask if his dad ever saw these guys play baseball. Why give us that information? I think he's trying to tell us something about not just about the question, but about like the speaker's relationship to the question, I guess. How do you, I'll make it simple. How do you ask somebody, hey, did you ever see, I don't know if you guys even care, Julio Jones got traded yesterday. You could ask somebody, hey, did you ever see Julio play in a Falcons jersey? You know, because it's history now.
Maybe it's kind of off.
What do you mean?
Like you're asking someone if they've ever seen something, and they usually like, yeah, I did. You're usually like, oh, that's cool. It's kind of like.
It's kind of the end of the. Yeah, it's almost a nothing question. It's just like, oh, that would have been cool to see DiMaggio or Mantle actually play. You know, they were great. They're Hall of Fame. Like that's. Oh, you know what? Same kind of question. Why did we drop those bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki? Same question. What does that tell us about the boy? Do you think?
Just curious.
Curious.
Well, sure.
He's not really giving it a second thought.
Why?
It's not that important anymore.
Why? Because we're kind of supposing it should be. We all know that's a heavy question. Why is he able to ask nonchalantly?
Because he doesn't know anything about it.
He doesn't know. He doesn't know. I'm going to dare to use this. Mindlessly. Mindlessly. That's pretty much how kids operate most of the time. They don't know that it's a big deal of a question, right? They can't. A better word for this, I'm going to give you ignorance, because that's what it is. Some people bristle at that term. All ignorance means is you don't know. But a slightly, maybe better term in this context is innocence. The boy is innocent. Now again, we kind of conflate that with like criminal justice these days. Again, all this means is you do not know, you are not experienced, you are not involved. That's what, to be innocent, that's what that means. Okay? Now importantly, because we kind of have to take all this together, what kind of innocent is the boy if he equates dropping those bombs to seeing these two guys play? Yeah. What I mean is, you're right, but what I mean is, like, innocent of what? Can we try to put a name to it?
Experience, life experience.
Sure, we gotta get more specific than that, but yes. What's, because you experience all kinds of things in your life. You get the sense the dad has experienced all kinds of things. He's seen some shit, would be the other way to put that. Sure. But let's get specific here. What does the boy not know, not understand about that question?
Conflict.
What do you mean by that?
Context. He wants to know why we would do something like that.
Yeah. Well, so he doesn't understand geopolitical maneuvering.
The context.
Sure. So, how do we sum that up? We can do better than this, but I'm going to leave it like that for right now. What I mean by the world is, again, well, and he doesn't know the world, but to be a man of the world or a woman of the world, like you know how certain things work. Do you know what I mean? Like, I'll give you an example. I showed up, those people offered me donuts. I don't trust somebody offering me donuts. I don't. Very nice, thank you. I walk. I don't. I feel like I have some knowledge of, I don't know you, type of. But if you're a little more innocent, a little more trusting, you might take one. They're good for you. But that, you see what I'm saying? Like, the boy here would not, that wouldn't even be a question. He's like, fucking donuts, yeah, obviously. So tell me more about these bombs, right? Like, it'd be the same type of thing. Okay. What we can do now, I'm going to put a pause on talking about the poem. I want to introduce to you, we're going to talk about, this is what most of today is about. I'm going to introduce to you, oh, I'm scared, will it go away if I hope it does. Wait, you told me last time. You had a guy. Do I have to use the pen?
No, last time you
Oh, it's down here. That's not helpful. Thanks, guys. All right. All right. So where we made our MLA sort of example, we're also going to try to build a paragraph real quick. How do we do that? To build any body paragraph, first of all, and I will erase this after we do it, but I just want to write up here for you. There's different sorts of nomenclatures you can use, you can be taught, okay? I was always taught the 3 I's, okay? And they are, identify, illustrate, and interpret. Now, if remembering those 3 items helps you remember what I'm about to tell you, awesome. It actually helped me when I was in your position. But what really matters is what these 3 I's pertain to. Okay? And they are this. Identify is your topic sentence. We're going to talk about this. Illustrate is your evidence. Interpret is your analysis. That's where your money is made. Okay. To tie this into what we've been doing, evidence is where you should start when it comes to building these things. You do not have an argument without evidence. You have an opinion. That's it. A lot of opinions walking around these days. Very little evidence. So, when I talk to you about alarm bells, you talk to me about the shadow, you talk to me about DiMaggio or mantle, those are potentially pieces of evidence. You pull a line or two, you put it into a paragraph, you start talking about what it might mean. That's analysis. We have been working on these 2 things already. Okay? Evidence is specific details from a text. A lot of the time in this class, it's a quotation. We're talking about poems for this unit. It's pretty much going to be quotations. Okay? You pull a couple lines, you talk about it in an effort to prove an observation, whatever that observation might be. That's analysis. Okay? All of that is in service of working to prove your topic sentence, which is you summing up whatever your argument is. Okay? The way I teach paragraphs, again, start with evidence every time. I think this line is cool. I'm not sure why. I'm going to try to figure that out. Start there. Okay? Your analysis is where you try to figure that out. Once you feel like you have, and it takes a while, by the way, but once you feel like you have, then you sum up whatever you figured out and you put it up top. That's a body paragraph. That's how it works damn near every time. There are magical moments where you have an argument and you just write it straight through, but usually when you try to do that, it doesn't work out well. Questions about that? Sweet. Can I erase this? Awesome. All right, so let's try it. We had, okay, we're talking about those lines. I'll show you how to cite lines too, by the way. Let me see. Oh, no, there we go. The boy's asking, we're at the top of the poem, he's looking through the bicycle, asking my father as, okay, I'm going to show you guys something. You would probably do it this way. I think Yeah, okay. A couple things. Well, I'll start with what you know. What do we need to quote this properly? We're missing some stuff. We need quotation marks. Very good. Anything else? We need a parenthetical. Now, there's a couple things about that. When in doubt, you want to give me the last name. Okay? There are rules about when you have to and when you don't. But if you're not sure, just give the last name. Okay. Just as important for polls, okay? If we were quoting a novel or something like that, we would give a page number, right? Here, we give line numbers. So, where are we at? Asking my father, 3, 4, 5, 6. Woo. Okay. So 3 through 6. Like that. Okay. And by the way, if you've forgotten, this is the document I shared with you guys, so you have it on your whatever. Now then, the next thing we got to do, because this is poetry, we have to incorporate line breaks. Like we talked about last time with Ullman playing basketball. Not all the time, but sometimes line breaks are important. They can change how you read certain things. So you have to show that to your reader. Here we break on mindlessly. So what you do is a space and a slash, and then another space on the other side. Then we break the mantle, I believe. Like that. And we break again on towns. Like that. Okay? The last thing I would say before we get into the nuts and bolts of this, I've said it a couple times, I'm going to say it a lot. You quote from language, not for ideas. What I mean by that is, you are taking something straight out of the poem, you're ripping it out of the poem and saying, you need to see this. Now it's your responsibility to incorporate it into a sentence and make it work grammatically. But all you're interested in when it comes to quoting is what I need to see from the poem. What I mean by that is, we highlighted the Maggio and mantle, right? So it seems like we need that. We were interested in that. Okay. I would say we probably need mindlessly. That's pretty good. That also gets into the like, I'm 5. Like it's just, okay. This one, asking my father as. We could say that. Do you know what I mean? Like, look at it this way. If you lose this, right? We can do that. So we didn't need that first part. We trimmed a little bit. The rest of it is pretty good. We can make some cuts. We're not going to waste time with that today. But the last thing I'll say before we continue, you do want to make sure this is a complete sentence. And I've done that for you here, right? It's just that easy. You guys will really sweat figuring this part out. But a lot of time it is that simple. Like, what is happening here? Well, the boy's asking his father. It's like, stop. That's it. You got it. The boy asked his father, as mindlessly. You'd have to change that to he with how we set it up. I guess I'll show you how to do that real quick. Yeah, and that's it. Okay? Put a period there, and you're ready to roll. Now, the hard part. The way I talked about building body paragraphs, right? Pull evidence first. Give me your evidence. We got some cool lines. We got some context, which is what this is. We got a citation. I don't know why I can't talk to that. After this, we got to figure out why this matters. What it might say about us as a people, a society, a culture. Big question. Well, let's start with kind of where we arrived at that prompted all this. Clearly, what? What does this tell us about the boy? that he's innocent, right? Clearly, the boy is innocent of, well, nearly everything. But specifically, I'm going to force this into a corner. What? This is where it gets hard, by the way. But anytime, well, most of the time you struggle or you have to take a second, that means you're doing work. This is what we want, okay? If you arrive at something easily, there's a very good chance you're not doing a lot of work. An old professor of mine compared it to, he talked about Olympic diving. Like, if you do all the, I don't watch diving, does anybody? But if you do all the things and you screw up a little bit, the judges are gonna give you a little bit of a pass because you tried. Conversely, if you get up there and do a cannonball, right? Like it's, even if it's the best, it's gonna, same kind of thing, okay? So, yes, the boy's innocent, and as we talked about, innocent of basically everything, but specifically here, what does he not know about, to ask the question how he does, what does he not know about it? About that question?
The content.
Okay.
The consequences.
Both of them. Okay. You went first, and then we'll come back. I think you're both right. What do you mean?
So for anyone who lived through that, that's obviously a very traumatic experience.
Yeah, it's and that might be part of what you're getting at too. You said context, or what did you mean?
Context and consequence.
Yeah.
Because he's asking why it happened, so he doesn't know much about the rest of the war other than what he's been told a little bit. So
Okay.
he doesn't really understand what happened, and he doesn't really seem to know much about all the destruction and all the deaths caused by it as well.
Well, and kind of what we're saying here is, so to combine those two, because the question literally says he doesn't know some of that too, right? But also, all right, we're trying to synthesize those. Like it's something like, but specifically here, he doesn't understand the damage. Oh, that's good. That's kind of to the point. The damage. And inside those who lived, something like that. And by the way, we're drafting in real time. I'm going to come at you with some ugly sentences, like it happens. But I think that's kind of what we're getting at. Like it's both of those things. On the surface of it, he asks the question, which tells us he doesn't know, right? Why did we? I don't know. But also, he doesn't know that asking that question is, at the very least, kind of rude. You know what I mean? Like, kind of like, you shouldn't ask that. Like, he doesn't know. He doesn't know that. Right? That's important. Okay. Now, what that allows us to do is talk more about what he doesn't know. Why doesn't he? Why doesn't he know that that question is maybe not very critical? Do what? Yeah. So what?
He hasn't been told any different. Maybe his parents shielded him from him.
Or maybe he just wasn't born.
Be careful with babies. I mean, yes to some of that, but be careful with babies.
It's like a little kid like asking someone their age, like they don't know what's wrong. Or
They don't know what's wrong. They don't know the age because they haven't been told, right? Well, okay, let's stop there. We gotta. I'll say sometimes you gotta breadcrumb me through the argument. Constantly, right? Same thing. So this is one of our breadcrumbs. How do we do that? He hasn't been told yet. All right. Now, I want to draw your attention to something. Where we're at in our analysis, if we stopped here, I think all of you would meet this with a little bit of a shrug, right? We know that. We know this. This is a start to an argument. It's not the end. Okay? If we stopped here, this is what's called a banal claim. It is a claim. It is an argument. But it's not one worth making. Okay? There's two ways you can go here. If you cannot move past this, I'm going to tell you right now, that means you should probably go looking for something else. Okay? But usually, and I think we can move beyond it into a more specific argument, something that is worth proving. Okay? And this is a good start. What I'm curious about, he hasn't been told yet. We all understand that's a very serious question. The father seems to understand it, in the poem. What is this telling us about innocence? I feel like we're kind of getting into here. We're kind of starting to think about what innocence even is. It's one of those things, and I love topics like this. It's one of those things we kind of take for granted. When you're young, you don't know things. Why? Well, it's because no one's told you. I mean, okay. Well, that means someone told you at some point, right?
Or you experienced it.
Yeah, you found out. You learned somehow. I feel like we're saying something about that here, right? The boy doesn't know this question is off limits. He hasn't been told yet. So what? Why should we be interested in that notion? What are we saying about knowledge here, or about learning, or about experience?
He's with someone who's much older,
Yeah, with his dad.
who's had that experience that he hasn't.
So he could maybe, potentially, tell him, or he could try to help him understand. But then in the poem, he doesn't.
He just breaks it.
He doesn't say anything, right? Why? Why didn't he say anything? Do you think? This is a big question. What's up?
He has bad memories of it?
Maybe.
He doesn't know what to say.
I think that's at least as likely. What would you say to a 5, 6-year-old, whatever, little boy? Why did we drop the bombs on those towns in Japan? Like, well, I mean, Pearl Harbor was one thing, and then,
Maybe his mother doesn't have an answer for it.
Well, again, what answer could you have? How could you adequately answer a child? Put it in his terms, right? Maybe you can't. Maybe he's too young. We have that idea, right? For sure. Well, let's start there again. So what? Why would we say he's too young or too inexperienced for an answer?
He couldn't comprehend it.
Couldn't comprehend it. Yeah. Yeah. We're at a very sort of pressure-filled point here.
I have another twist on that.
Go for it.
His father, since his father freezes, he's obviously having some sort of traumatic experience. Maybe he doesn't want to explain the horrors that he saw to his 5 or 6-year-old child.
Sure.
And so he's trying to think of a way to explain it, but every thought he has is just kind of like instruction.
There's no... Again, we have to be a little bit careful because we don't get to see the dad's head, right? We do know he knows something. And we do know that it's almost certainly beyond the boy's comprehension, probably a little rough, to put it mildly. But that's all we can say. I always want you to pump the brakes on what we can prove. But we can prove a lot of that, just not all of it. But my point there is, yeah, like I think it's, I hate to table this, but I think we have to. I think what you're trying to get into might be another, like might be the next paragraph, basically. Like you might pull the line, freezes like a rabbit in headlights, and that's the next sort of bit of argument after this. You see what I'm saying? But absolutely, absolutely. Okay, where were we? Oh, he's too young, too experienced to comprehend what his father might offer. This is a hard question, and we really have no more time to cover it, but why? Why can't he comprehend whatever his dad might give him?
Uneducated, possibly.
Yeah. So are we saying, and I'm honestly asking, are we saying then that the state of innocence, which this boy is in some ways, like, makes it harder to gain experience? You see what I mean? Like if you're so innocent, you can't even begin to understand how the dad might break this down. You know what I'm saying? Does that make sense? Okay. That's kind of interesting, right? Because again, we're used to the idea that he's too young, whatever, but I think what we're actually saying, and I think what the poem might be actually getting to here, when he says, mindlessly, DiMaggio or Mantle, right? Right? Something like that. Now here's the point, because we got to take a break in a minute. It sucks because we have way more to talk about. But all we've done, we have our cool quotation. We started talking about it. And I think we finally, here by the end, arrived at like kind of a cool thought. What we barely scratched the surface of, and I just started, is actually talking about the quotation. We don't have time to do it right now, so I'll leave you with this and then we'll go on break. He could have said anything here, okay? He could have said, the boy asked his father as mindlessly as he would ask if he ever, I don't know, caught a lightning bug with his hands. You know, why we dropped the bomb. Like any kid thing he could have asked. But he asked about famous baseball players, right? Most of us don't give a shit about baseball these days. I know I don't. If you do, that's cool. I mean, I'm not. I'm just saying, like the world we live in is different from this world. Back then, DiMaggio and Mantle were a big deal. A very big deal. So big a deal, this little boy knows about it. We just said, he doesn't know anything. He doesn't know anything. He knows about these guys. Where's the Pacific, he says later. Well, I know about these guys. Right? They're huge. They're huge. It's kind of interesting, I think, that these guys can penetrate that innocence, that ignorance. He knows about them. Right? He knows who they are. This whole bomb thing, I don't know what that's about, but like I know these guys. That tells us something too about how that innocence works, I think. Maybe. It can tell us a lot of things, but we don't have time because we got to go on break. But my point is, there's more to be done here, right? This is just the start. All right, go take a break. Do whatever you got to do.